yeah.
And sometimes you can take terrible pictures. Dawn can't take terrible pictures, of course, but sometimes you can have an awful picture. But
Hang on, this isn't the bickering we were promised.
So, unfortunately, we'll torture Chris and Mark again and say the idea here was to pretend we were going through a form, and the only cheat we've done. Oh, here's Chris. The only cheat we've done is it's a form we've done before. We picked one that we thought would be good rather than choose one at random and find there was all kinds of other stuff we'd have to explain we didn't do on this one. And so this is fairly typical. It's sets of pictures. Because often when we go and dive, we dive the same site because we have to park the same van, the van in the same place. We don't always dive together. In this instance, we did. And often we will take complementary pictures. So Dawn takes macro pictures, and I often do wide angle pictures, and they're good for scenery. And again, you can see where we're going and the kinds of habitats we're encountering different animals in. For the snorkelers, hopefully this will show that there are wide vistas, but sometimes those wide vistas are some way offshore. So the dive here is out to the end of the gullies from Sheringham Esplanade. And so that will take us out 400 or 500 meters. And that's very dramatic. And that's probably the course of a dive of, how long was it?
This one was 92 minutes.
So an hour and a half underwater, and in Penny's camera is very exciting. Nice ceiling, Penny. Excellent. So this is about an hour and a half underwater. We've edited these down, not for quality, because we wanted it to be warts and all, but actually they're all brilliant. So we started off with about 500 pictures between us, and we've thinned them down to a slim 180. And we've tried to interleave them so you can see sort of the scenery we went through from the wide angle pictures, and then the things that were interesting. And we'll see what we can pick out of the wide angle pictures, because often that's what people have. They take a picture of an entire scene, and then they'll say, that little blob over in the corner, the thing you can't see, I thought it was a prawn. And you go, you could have thought a lot of things. Now that we're back again, we can't tell what it is. And sometimes you can use them as an aid memoir, but if you're trying to harvest enough detail to identify an animal, you have to bring some of the key stuff back. If you've seen them a lot, then you can say, oh, I've seen that thing before. That looks to me like more Placamium. Talking of which, where's Mick Bateman?
Yes,
he was going to be here for the seaweed. But sometimes you just say, that is just a mass of red fluff. Ooh, that's just green mush. And you can't go beyond that. And in that case, you could say, oh, red seaweed, green seaweed, but you can't say,
new person.
Ooh, Lucy's iPad. Excellent. But you can't say, that's Bryopsis, if it's just mush. Which is unfair, because you probably can say that's Bryopsis, because Bryopsis is a littler thing. Yeah. I was never expecting this many people, and we've rambled for a good 5 minutes. So hopefully all the good people have arrived. We've got Chris, who we will treasure. We've got Lucy, who is a treasure. Obviously, Jens is new. And we've got Kat and Inga, who have been such a massive problem. But we're glad you're here, because this is just for you. The idea is, what can you harvest from a photo? So without further ado, I'll try to share a screen, and we'll head off into this. Okay. So I'll minimize you, because I didn't realize until recently this would give you a black box on the side. Okay, so we've got loads and loads of folders of pictures. We've gathered these, and this is just an easy, cheap, free thing for looking at pictures. And I would encourage you, when you're looking at your pictures, then find out how your picture fiddling thing works. We can suggest some good ones. This is called Fast Stone, rather than Fast One, because it is free. It's good for doing raw and stuff with complicated cameras. Can we hold? We can hide that bar, can't we? That's a thing we can do.
Was it under more?
More, hide video panel, hide floating meter controls, Control Alt Shift H. Well, that's easy enough. Okay, so here we've got the edit, the handy 180 or so pictures. We will zoom in a bit to some of them, but not all of them. And we'll try and go through this in less than an hour. And if we do that, or you're still alive, we've got some bonus prawns. So I'm glad we've gone to screen sharing.
There's an incentive.
Yeah. Excellent. So we start out on some sand. And so that could be a habitat. It's easy to note down. It's easy to draw. And from a Seasearch point of view, this is sediment with life apparent because we've got poo.
We have. So that's, if you wanted to start at the most simple thing, that is the poo of a lugworm. So you could note that you had lugworms present. Of the two species we get locally, that will be Arenicola marina, because it's sand-coloured poo. And a bit later on, you'll see Arenicola diffodians, which is dark-coloured poo in comparison with the local sediment. Also, we can see that the sand is rippled, which is important to note, and it's actually rippled parallel to the beach.
Yeah, it usually is.
Except overstrained.
Yeah. Remembering the worms is obviously something we expect you to do.
Yes.
But in this instance, sandy worm poo and black worm poo are actually species identifying descriptions. So don't overthink it. Hopefully you'll learn the weird pretend Latin, but that could be enough. The poo colour is important, and you can't see the animal, but it's there because you can see it's poo. We head across the sand.
And there is a hermit crab in the middle. And even zooming in, you'd be hard put to say which hermit crab you had there. There's not really enough detail.
No, so that's hermit crab sp, and so SP is just shortened species, a species of hermit crab. And if you were feeling sexy, that could be Pagarus spur, because Pagarus are the hermit crabs.
And you can already see that's also got pink encrusting algae on the shell it's borrowed from somebody else.
Okay, so we're up to 3 species already. And I suppose in this photo, we can't tell if these are sand masons. It's just mush.
Yeah.
So we're not going that far yet. Ah, poo. So more poo, dark poo, and so that's Arenicola diffodians.
Yes.
Isn't this exciting? The seaweed is just drift. We can tell what it is, and you seaweed people probably can as well. But I'll just say this one out loud. This is Gracilaria gracilis, slender wartweed, and you can see the warts on it. Lots of stringy red stuff you couldn't identify. You just stringy red stuff drifting by. This stuff, you can see the warts on it. They're sort of moving them into the center. So that's the species ID, but this is drift, so we don't write it down yet.
And those are its sexy bits, so they're only there at certain times of the year, not all year round.
Yeah, at least it's clearly a red, because lots of the time it looks quite brown. At last, we're getting close to the reef. And even in this wide angle view, because this is taken with a fisheye lens, so this is a 180-degree view, corner to corner, and it does flatter the clarity of the water, and it makes it look as though you can see further than you can. That's probably a a 3-meter view to the back.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not huge, but even on this view, we can dip in and have a look round. And this stuff is probably mostly grassolaria again.
Yes.
But I think from this distance, I can't see any warts.
No, I wouldn't be confident to definitely identify it if I didn't already know what it was.
Yeah. And the answer there is to go in closer. We're starting to see.
There's some warts on that one in the middle.
Oh, excellent! Yeah, so we can see some warts even from 2 meters away. With a wide-angle lens. We're seeing some warts.
Plenty of keel worms on the boulders as well.
Yeah, so if a big scenery shot like this starts to give you hints, what do you think the green stuff is?
I think it will be Cladophora, but it's too small at the minute and indistinct.
Yeah, so how much can you tell from that picture? We're looking at it at full 100% pixel for pixel res, and it's just green strings. So that we can't tell.
Yeah. And that's partly down to conditions as well as the picture being far away, because the stuff in the bit where you get the wave action will always be stunted and unhappy.
Yeah, let's swim over to it.
Ooh.
That's the cure for this problem. Lots of people will take a nice picture, excellent, captures a scene, and they've done a bit of mental zooming where they know what's in the picture and why it was interesting. They use it to take a note, and then the note doesn't actually contain enough information to convey an ID. And this will be a further problem. The camera that took this picture with a fisheye lens, to get that view is probably 3 times closer than you could get that view with a nice little camera, maybe 4 times closer. The lens on it probably cost, if I'd paid for it, 4 times as much as a nice little camera. So a little camera will not get this kind of detail to go and look from distance at your scenery. With this, you can scan around, and by situation, so nice keel worms.
And you can see there's white fuzz on the algae. But with this distance, you can't actually say what it is, even though we know what it is.
Had someone just shouted out a question? Apparently not.
No, just sneezed.
Excellent. Okay, so it's still useful to have closer up pictures. And the nice thing about a small camera is you can do that. And the bigger cameras we tend to dive with, it's actually hard to do that. So the wide angle views are great for assessing a habitat. I think Kat had said she'd posted a picture of an anemone and said, what's the habitat here? And you could do it by sort of forensic detective work. You could say, well, the Dahlia anemone's got to be on a bit of rock. Likelihood this is an area of cobble. I can see sand around it, so I can deduce this is an area of cobble with some sand. But if you're describing an area, you ideally want it to be representative. So if that's the only Dahlia anemone you found, you can't say too much about the whole area. But in a picture like this, you can say, yeah, that's a lot of sort of cobble, sort of hand-holded or handheld rocks smaller than a head, with mixed algae over the top. So you can describe this habitat pretty well. There's nothing tall there yet. Maybe there's a few, maybe there's a few small boulders under that algae, but again, you'd swim over and find that out.
Plenty of sediment on the rock as well.
Plenty of sediment. Excellent. Let's have another picture. Oh, at last, we've zoomed in. And so when you've swum over, and this is what the smaller cameras are very good at, is getting closer. This is flash lit rather than ambient lit. And you're nice and close, you can focus on the thing, and now we can look at that seaweed, but when we go in, we can start to pick species off the things we're taking pictures of.
Matchbox creatures.
people talking to each other.
Well, that's fine. So what's the white stuff on that seaweed?
So that's the bryozoan crust electropolosa. Is it frosty sea mat, I think is the common name.
Yeah, so that's a coating on a red seaweed, and when it's flat, it grows like ice on a windscreen in the winter. I guess its characteristic on things like this is it looks furry, because the little individuals, each one of those circles contains an individual, is spiky, and you can see the sort of furry fringes on it. And also we can look closer at this seaweed.
And none of it's got warts on.
And none of it's got warts on. Where are its warts?
It's just not feeling very sexy.
Yeah. We know situationally that this is Gracilaria gracilis, but Gracilaria gracilis can't be told apart from other species outside of its reproductive season. So we know, we've looked around, we've found those examples with warts on, but here we've got bycatch of another species. Another wide angle, and we can look in here, we can see there's a better scattering of species. Let's have a look round.
Okay, and this was pretty early in the year for us. This was in June, and so a lot of the seaweeds are left over from the previous year, the sort of tougher things, and the others that have only just started growing. So the fresh bits are really quite small still.
Okay, so we'll have a closer look at things, but in this example picture, we could identify there's Polyoides rotundus. It's the red, it's probably both the red. It's the red one here. As we look around, the brighter red there is Placamium. Again, we'll have a closer look. The fishbone stuff is Corallina officinalis. Lots of white looking weed, and that's just got an overgrowth of that frosty sea mat electropolosa. We're getting repeats, aren't we? There's some Chondrus crispus there. Had a funny ringing noise. I'll check we're not being messaged.
I think it's probably somebody's phone.
Yeah,
ring.
we're full screen, and that's Gracilaria again, I think. Okay, so you can pick out probably half a dozen species of seaweed plus some species growing over the top. Let us go on. We've left you all unmuted, so if you've, the way we're doing this, because I think if we show full screen, if we have the admin screens for the talk up, you get a black box in the way. I've minimized it so we can't see if you're sending us chat messages. So do shout out if you send us a question or just butt in. Dawn was gesturing to me and I'll let her tell you.
I thought this was just one I'd taken in passing to remind me of the green seaweed Cladophora rupestris, which is a big fluffy branching thing, but actually looking at it now, I can see there's also the funny straight seaweed called Chetomorpha linum. And zoom in and look at that bit. This is like sort of strange ropes made of little piled up individuals. It's called brickweed sometimes.
Yeah, I think it depends how it's lit, but these are effectively strands, and you can see the joints between sections. If they're backlit, you can see them as sort of green bricks, and this is front lit, and they're shiny and glossy, so you see them as sections, if that makes sense.
And the little feeble branching stuff in amongst it, that's the Cladophora, which is sometimes called chainweed, I think, for some reason.
Yeah, we'll have a look. We'll find you a clean Cladophora.
Later
you
on.
can see there's fuzzy stuff there. So these distinct filaments, as well as a fuzzy growth there. And the nice thing about taking pictures is you can just shoot into interesting clouds of stuff, and if you take enough pictures, you'll get some examples you can pore over later on. This is classic Placamium cartilaginum.
Just Placamium.
Sorry, just Placamium. We've established with experts that they can't tell us which kind of Placamium it is.
there may be more than one.
Yeah. The problem is because Procamium is called combweed, and the different species often have different numbers of combs, but the numbers overlap. So unless you count all of them, you can't distinguish different species other than by DNA sequencing. It's been crippling.
Yes. You can also see there's a couple of beadlet anemones on the smaller cobbles at the front. That's the sort of dark red blobs. They're closed up. Normally you'd find these pretty much intertidally, but this year they've been appearing quite far out. We've seen them sort of 8 or 9 meters deep.
And looking into this sort of zoomed in area, and this looks rife with possible ID questions. And I'd say almost everything in this picture, aside from the white worms, the red anemone, and the small
tiny seaweeds.
Seaweed in the centre now, which is Calablepharis ciliata, is what we would characterize as unidentifiable flob.
Yes.
Oh, there's an elegant anemone. A lot of this stuff has been grown over, encrusted, grown through, and isn't distinct anymore. There's lots of possibilities here, but it would take a closer up picture to get into fine detail. Okay, and that's what we'll do. What's next? It's pretty much the same kind of view.
No, let's carry on.
You can see the scenes developing. We're going into, we're getting away from the shore, and the seaweed is actually getting denser. Ooh.
So this is a close-up of Corallina officinalis, which is a calcified red seaweed. You can see it looks like it's made out of hard plastic or something. It's got lots of chalk inside it, and the new growth points are white, where it extrudes the chalk and then grows over it in a skin. There's 3 kinds of Corallina, but locally we've only seen Corallina officinalis so far.
Yeah. Officinalis being the old word people used to add on to things, apparently saying they were used medicinally. Doesn't mean they're going to do you any good now, but apparently that's what it meant.
Maybe it's for extracting chalk, you know, for medicinal things.
Oh, it's probably for scaring evil spirits out. There's just lots of little weird bits in amongst it, which I'm pretty sure we will come across in other ways.
Yeah. Quite nice electropolosa, just going off the, now in the centre. You can almost see that the individuals are sort of hairy and spiky there.
Yeah. I'll try and put the thing we're talking about in the middle of the screen when we zoom in. So if you wanted to use a black marker to draw crosshairs, you could, but I won't pay for that to be cleaned up. I did hear a brilliant story about a thrusting management thing. I think that's
a sand mason. Lanise. So it's coming in from the right, and it's got its sort of little hairy tentacles going towards the left, each one encased in a thin skin of sand granules.
Groovy. Had you seen something else?
Just saying, it looks like there might be something in focus up there, and it is not. Okay, carry on.
Okay, so there you are. So that was our zoom in. The fluffier red weed here is mostly Procamium again.
The tiny fluff on the Corallina, I don't know what that is. That's too small. Okay,
so the stunning admission straight off is, even with pictures like this, you can't identify everything. You might have needed to sample these to bring them back. And I mean, what we find is that we'll come back and we go through these and we will get perhaps 80 to 100 species. And that's good for an underwater dive. Terrestrial biologists will go into their garden and record over a period of time, so weeks, months, 1,000, 2,000 species. And so we know there are thousands of species here. And one of the, I guess, sobering thoughts is you will not be able to identify everything you see. You are doing your best, and our rationale is you try to identify the stuff that is you're positively able to identify and confident about, not not to make something up. You're not reaching. If you find yourself reaching for an identification you can't complete with confidence, then you back off. So if you didn't know what this stuff was, you could say it's red algae. You could be 100% confident. Because of its tatty growth, we can say this is Calybliferous ciliata.
And I'd say this is quite nice. The stuff with the white crust all over it is last year's, and then the little fresh bright red bits in the middle are this year's new growth just starting through.
So the new growth is quite smooth, and that's confusing because the old growth has a crust on it and is really quite lumpy.
Like a hedgehog.
Although it's not sharp here, we have got a lovely picture of this growing through sharp later on. The red bits are the weed growing through the bryozoan crust. And that's characteristic. Where it's damaged, it will sprout in all directions. Excellent. Let us see if we have a... Oh, and now we've got a piece of rubbish. And we would like you to record the litter you see. And this is a piece of a lost pot. Not always entirely obvious, but you can see there's a piece of thin metal bar, steel bar, and a hoop. That's pretty obviously the end of a pot, and it's got mesh on, and we're trying to increase our accuracy of recording, and that's not to persecute the fishery at all. We're trying to be more accurate about any litter and human debris we see. And what have we got there? We've got some flob.
I think that might turn out to be 2 vase sponges, but I'm not so sure now.
I'm pretty sure that's Ascidians.
You think it is?
Yeah. And like we said with the Electropelosa, the frosty sea mat, frosty sea mat's supposed to be flat. When it grows around something, it's a different shape. These colonial sea squirts would form a carpet, but here they're growing around thin tubular seaweed, and if it branches, they take on really odd shapes. So I think that's the one we did think was Oplidium glabrum, but we don't anymore.
No, now we think it's Botuloides leachi growing as a 3-dimensional structure rather than its normal sort of skin over things.
Marine animals are horrible.
Yes.
They don't have to deal with the same gravity we do. Do you think there's Molgula inside that?
I think so, but there's a much nicer, clearer one later.
Yeah, so if you can see the Werther's original trapped inside that seaweed, sort of in person, you could see what that was. Here, it's a featureless caramel blob. We'd need a better picture. But as you're swimming along, if your camera isn't great or you don't have the time, you can take aid memoir pictures so that if you know what a particular kind of sea squirt is like, if that's a Molgula sea squirt, you can use a picture like this as an aid memoir as you go along, so you note it to yourself. It's the equivalent of writing it down on paper, and people have used that for surveying for years, when in truth, paper doesn't prove anything. You're making notes about your ID, and you can do the same with a camera if you know what you're looking at. So what's this one?
So this is this year's Teonia atomaria seaweed. And because it's only just starting up, it's very little and still very clean. It'd be very easy to mistake this for Dictyota dichotoma, the other brown seaweed that forks and branches. And I think at this height, you'd probably just say flat brown seaweed.
Now, I think it depends how familiar you were with the characteristics. I think there's a couple of good tassels, and they're like little ribbons.
Very square-ended as well.
Yeah, square-ended, and they don't really divide. They come to an end when they're clean and undamaged, they're square, and they become a bit frayed later on. And sometimes you see a bit of a texture in them, but these are nice and new, so there's not much of that. So that was Teonia. Dawn pointed out when we were looking at these before that there's some bryozoan in the background. If we zoom in, you can probably see the regular pattern of a bryozoan, but it's a bit of a stretch to say exactly what it is unless you're already familiar with it. So we're not going to tell you. We'll wait for that to occur later on. Oh, here we are again. And I think this was a nicer bit of Calibliferis ciliata, or eyelash weed. And you can see where it is growing little tassels through that sea mat cover. And this sea mat cover is the frosty sea mat. And if we look at that one, you can see how it's spreading with sort of forks and spikes. And so those are IDs we're able to make from shape, even on this wide angle picture pretty well. But as this is a wide angle picture, that's us in at 100% magnification. Let's go on. Oh. Okay, so choosing someone at random. Mick, who isn't here. Mick had asked about common seaweeds. And so this could be one of two seaweeds. Does anybody know which two seaweeds it could be? Versillaria?
Yeah, but I can't remember the other half.
Imbricata?
Lumbricalis.
Okay, so we are muttering quietly. So where it occurs, usually here. So this could be Versillaria umbricalis. Lumbricalis, sorry. Or Polioides rotundus. And you can't tell without looking at its bottom. Like so many people around here, you can only truly understand them by looking underneath them. And that's because the base, these two seaweeds are almost identical aside from their base, the holdfast. So no matter how far you look, more Electropolosa. Anything else?
There won't be much else, not much grows on it.
It's pretty smooth. It grows very forky. It's very forky. It is called forkweed sometimes, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay. But later on, we've got a picture of the base, and that was Dawn making a note to herself that she had looked at the base to confirm it was Polioides rotundus. That's the kind we get around here. We don't actually get.
We do sometimes get the other one, just not as often.
Okay, so this is just a general bit of scenery, and some people will say, oh, I don't bother taking pictures of crabs.
Because I see so many.
Because I see so many. Or I just take pictures, one of everything. And you'll find that if you do that, when you get back, it's hard, well, unless you're an absolute miracle, which some of you are, unless you're absolutely sort of intellectually impermeable, it's hard to say how frequently you saw stuff, or to review it if you've got 10 dives to do, or maybe 40, like Chris. If you've got a lot of dives to do, then I'd say take pictures of stuff as you go along. No harm in having 20 pictures of crabs. It shows you that you saw crabs regularly. Crabs are a frequent occurrence, and the same with big areas of sand masons or
Plumos and anemones.
Plumos and
There are
anemones.
people that never write those down.
Yeah, it reminds you they were there, even if they were common, and it gives you an indication of how common they were. Something like an edible crab, you don't need a better picture than this to identify. There'll be loads of other useful stuff. Look at that pink encrusting algae. That's something that people almost forget. So those pink rocks those pink areas are pink encrusting algae. There's a load of sand masons, and these background shots can sometimes give you an idea that a thing you thought was comparatively rare because it was just not notable is actually extremely frequent. Much of the so I use a shortcut to take it back. Much of the seabed is covered in sand masons much of the year, and pausing to look at a picture like this will remind you, oh, look at that. So there we've got some nice little bits of Teonia.
Starting to fray at the ends.
Just starting. They're getting to be maybe 5 centimeters high, and they're starting to broaden out and fray.
Also, Chondria dasyphylla, the sort of red one with the side branches that pinch in just before they meet the main stem, which is in the middle now.
Yeah, so they're like little sausages.
Hmm.
So a seaweed made of little sausages. What else have we got? Oh, I thought I saw something else over here.
Chondrus crispus in the middle.
Oh yes, that's a nice easy one. That dark stag's horn type stuff is Chondrus crispus. Is Chondrus crispus a red or a brown?
It's a red, but it's always a browny yellow colour. It bleaches very easily, and unfortunately, it can be almost any shape.
Well, it's generally that kind of shape, but it can be different fineness, can't it? Sometimes it's very coarse, and sometimes it's extremely fine. So that's Chondrus crispus, which is brown, which is red. That's Teonia, which is brown.
Mm-hmm.
This is Chondrus crispus that's red.
That's Chondria dasyphylla.
Sorry, Chondria dasyphylla, which is red. Over there, we've got Chondria dasyphylla that's a bit further away, and the lighting is making it look brown. So get close, and this again will be a bit of a theme. I guess even there, that stuff by the front of the crab, there's a variety of things. Some red, some brown. Seaweed can brown as it gets older. It's rotten. So move close and let the camera or your torch light it up so you can see it properly. Here's Dawn looking at the base of Polyoides rotundus.
Yeah, so unfortunately, this to everybody here just looks like a big mess of stalks. What I'm doing is pulling it all back to see that it has a small disc-shaped holdfast. It doesn't have any real roots coming out from it. All the stuff sticking out is future shoots waiting to go straight up. The other one, Versilaria lumbricalis, has a big branching holdfast that sticks out all over the place to grip onto the rock.
Yeah, because I think the disc holdfast on this is probably maybe a centimetre across.
Yeah, it is piddly.
So what you're seeing here is an absence of a clawed foot or clawed holdfast, rather than a beautiful picture of a small holdfast.
Because I'd have to pull it off.
Yeah, so that's still proof. So there is no clawed holdfast here, so it is Polyoides rotundus. And we get a bonus of red encrusting algae, which is a thing.
It is.
That's a real thing. The encrusting algae are pretty much impossible to tell apart, but red encrusting algae is a species identity, or a confident identity, which you can add to your form. So it's easy, isn't it? So you've got pink encrusting algae, red encrusting algae. That's 2 freebies, and you'll see them easily. Oh, green one.
Oh, that's a bit better. So that's the Cladophora from earlier. You can see how branchy and fine it is.
How many types of Cladophora are there?
Oh, Christ, more than 10?
How many do we see around here?
Confidently 1, but there are at least 3. I can't tell them apart.
Okay, so this is the one we normally see.
Yeah, this is the common one.
And,
Cladophora rupestris.
Yeah, and so that's, I mean, if you see Cladophora, is it safe to assume it's rupestris?
Generally, yes. The others are quite a bit smaller.
Yeah,
So if you see a big healthy one, it's going to be that locally.
Okay, so what's a big healthy one?
Maybe 6 inches high.
Ooh, some of these people are young. I know that Chris is
15
young.
centimetres.
15 centimetres, yeah. So, yeah, 4, 6 inches, 10, 15 centimetres. That's a good sized little seaweed. Okay, some of this other stuff you can see, and this is a problem with, I guess, the leafier seaweeds, is they're a bit blurred. They aren't very well defined, and we would probably have to wait for a better picture to say what that red stuff is in the middle. I apologise. So this scenery has its uses, but it's not. It has its limits.
For a minute. I'm just going to say that one that we can't identify. A useful feature of it is that it's only growing on the side of the rock where it's in the shade. It's not growing healthily on the top. So that's a thing to note for later.
Ooh, fancy that. Otherwise, you can see just how many different seaweeds there are here. We've got the Chondria dasyphylla again, Chondrus crispus.
Placamium at the top.
Placamium up there. Polyoides.
Yep.
The Clodophora we spoke about. What's more Placamium? Yeah, there's lots of it, and there's some more.
Caliblepharus
Caliblepharus.
and Corallina.
Jump and prance. Yes, indeed. As Shaggy would have said. Right, oh, well, this looks deeply speculative. What are you looking at here?
So this close-up is just to remind me that I've seen some nudibranch eggs. Didn't see the adults, and it's not a particularly unusual shape for nudibranchs, so I can't say what they're the eggs from, but it does remind me to start looking out for the adults, which we don't see very often. If you back off again, yeah, it's on, I think it's on Gastroclonium reflexum, which is very much like the Chondria dasyphyla, but each individual sausage can be pinched several times along its length, and the plant as a whole will sort of grow up, arch over, and then touch back down on the rock and set itself off again. I think this darker stuff is probably Polyoides, but I think the small bits.
Okay, so this is Polyoides. We think over here, these pinched sausages,
Yes.
because Gastroclonium tends to grow low to rocks,
Yes.
because it loops over.
Like a tiny bramble patch.
Yeah.
I was looking at these funny forking hairs that are in the middle at the minute. I'm not sure what that is.
Yes, there's a sad admission. I was looking at those too. Hopefully you can see there's some clear sort of filaments. They look almost like bristles around that piece of algae in the middle. They are small things.
They are, because I'm pretty sure that doesn't have branching bristles as part of its ID.
Okay, a mystery. How exciting. Oh, here's a lovely piece of behavior. So always fun to take a picture of a crab doing something weird. And it's within its setting. And again, you can see there's a new seaweed.
Oh, yes, this is a brown.
This is a brown. I know Kat knows what this is.
I don't think Kat's got sound on, unfortunately.
Well, I assume she'll be saying, what will she be saying?
Cladostephus spongiosus.
Yeah. And it looks a bit like Halluris. But this one is a brown.
Yes.
And Halluris is a red.
Yes. And if you look at it closely, which I think we will later, it's very much like that Canadian pondweed. It's like a tiny version of that.
So although it looks like a sort of velvety stag's horns, it's actually a central stem with small leaves that curl over inward back to the stem again. Nice scenery. Oh, we're going to have to get going, otherwise we'll be trapped here forever.
Yeah, we're only about 5 minutes in. This one was just taken or left in to remind us that this is actually a chalk plain with all kinds of cobbles and boulders sitting on the top. It's not mixed sediment.
Yeah, you might see mixed sediment, but from pretty much the end of the groins at Sheringham out to, on a good day, 500, 600 yards, well, on a good day, a kilometre, has chalk underneath it. And you may come across areas of exposed chalk, which will be different from the cobbles. The cobbles sit on top because they're freed out of the chalk as it's dissolved and broken up. Onward. Whoa, well, we've already said what that is. So hopefully, if I said 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, name it, Mick would have shouted,
had he been here.
Had he been here, Chondrus crispus. So darkish stag's horns branching repeatedly. Morteonia.
Yes, nothing much we haven't seen there. I just think we should start speeding up a bit.
Yeah, we will. And some of that Chetomorpha.
Yes.
The green filamentous stuff. Okay, so this is an animal. And the thing I remember about this picture is regretting not having a better look at what it was in. So that's a large piece of metal. And I don't know whether it's a part of an aircraft or a part of a boat. And that would be useful. One is historic wreckage, and the other is recent litter. Oh, and there's a lobster.
Hmm.
What the hell's that for?
I don't know. Probably just an interesting collection of things. Carry on.
Yeah. If we were going through this at normal speed, we would have had a look at all of these a bit deeper. We're overdoing it.
Yeah.
So this is a terrible picture. Why is it here?
Just to remind me, there was a lot of placamium.
Yeah, so we can tell this is placamium. You can see that the fronds of this seaweed are flattened, and it's fine, and it branches and branches and branches again.
It's quite ferny looking.
Yeah, ferny looking. So there are portions of this picture that are in focus, and sometimes that's enough. So this is definitely placamium.
Yeah, it's just been a passing grab.
Yeah. Down here, I think that's Carini eximia.
See, I think it's Clytia.
And that is why we can't write it down.
Yeah. Well, you could put it down as individual hydroids and leave it at that.
Quite true. If this was the best picture you had,
Yeah.
or you had seen it, and this was a note, then that would be fine. If this is the only ID information you have, it's a stretch to call it anything at all. And thankfully, we've taken about 10 billion pictures, and we'll see it again.
Yes.
So some more Taonia, and this is continuing the theme of keeping recording stuff, even though we've seen it before.
Yeah, so we're moving further out now. Seaweed's getting taller, and you can see the ground is getting more rolling, and it's more chalky.
Ooh.
I'd skip on. There's nothing there we haven't seen.
Nothing there. Oh, but these people want to see. Well, if you are to nip in, then even on a workaday picture.
Oh, well done. Yes.
When we go through almost all our pictures at 100%, and Dawn was about to skip through because, well, she's seen these all before, but you can easily see the bryozoan, all these round holes about, but you can also see these little sticks with heads on.
Yes. And
those are Clytia hemispherica.
Yes.
Which is a hydroid. And that's the hydroid Dawn thought she saw in that picture a few back, which was just a blur. And you can probably see they're joined together at the bottom by white lines, which ironically, let's see if I can actually, if I click on it, I can zoom in. And if I move my hand across, sort of the heads and sticks are joined along the leaf or the blade by stolons. So this is a stoloniferous hydroid, and the little white heads, which aren't perfectly in focus but are easy to identify, are like little polyps on a coral or an anemone, and you can see it's pretty common. Oh, there's a nice one.
A nice little one.
Let's pop one in the middle, so you can see a head and all its little feeding tentacles dotting round. And I think, in all fairness, it's possible to do this because Dawn's using quite a nice camera. With a smaller camera, you would be hard pushed to get, I guess, beyond about this point. No, hang on, that's 50%. So I reckon a big camera lets you magnify about twice as much. So this requires that you have a good picture in focus, but it's not hard to focus on those things because they are in the same plane as the seaweed. So a small camera should let you do this kind of stuff, and it's worth shooting weird things because you never know, they might actually turn out to be interesting. And on to the next one. Oh, that's a good bit of scenery.
Yeah, it's worth zooming in a bit on that and saying what we can see that we haven't already.
Okay, so I think we can say this rock has a big wig with male pattern baldness of placamium.
Yes.
So that's placamium at the back. That's coneweed. And if you've dived or you've snorkeled, you'll have seen a lot of that. There's some Cladophora. Oh, it's a painted top shell. And there's an elegant anemone. There's some sponge in there. And the big feature of the picture is the seabed is weird. These little twigs, little sort of the branching carpet texture on the seabed, which if I zoom back out again, makes it look sort of solid. Those are worm tubes. So this is Polydora ciliata.
Yes.
Ciliata.
Nice here.
And in this hollow, you can see each one of them has two little tentacles poking out. And you can say that again. So that's something you can spot even from a wide-angle picture. And this seaweed here?
Yes, we should mention that while we're here. So this is Rhodymenia holmesii. Some people call it Y weed because it always makes a Y shape, just branches once. And it likes to be in the shade. So the deeper you go, the more of it you'll see. And you'll see it's always on the sides of rocks where it can get a bit of shade.
Okay, so that looks like it's probably 3 to 4, maybe 5 centimeters high. Not even that much?
Not even that, not compare it with that.
Yeah. Look at the size of the top shell.
Yeah,
so the top
it's only
shell,
a centimetre or 2.
Yes, that's really small, Y-shaped, and would start to get lost under other seaweeds.
Mm.
So it's in a low light area that it stands a chance. Interesting, well spotted. Oh,
didn't we do this once?
we did. The two sets are lightly interleaved because I take twice as many pictures as Dawn, and so there's more of my guff than hers, but we cut more of mine out.
There might be some ceramium on that page.
Okay, let's zoom in. So this is a piece of Caliblepharis ciliata, showing it growing little tentacles, tassels through that bryozoan. I don't know if that's made it any clearer, or whether this looks like a colony of worms out on a day out just before COVID restrictions in Liverpool. But it's part of this seaweed, and you can see the characteristic edge there. I'll zoom back out. I don't think that's Placamium.
Sorry, I meant ceramium. Did I say Placamium?
Yeah, okay, ceramium, you think. Oh,
yeah.
And it is ceramium. So this is a species spot which probably wasn't spotted in situ.
Almost certainly not.
And so the ceramium is this stripy Tim Burton tights kind of effect. It's little bits, and ceramium's often known as clawweed or pincerweed, and you can see the ends of the branches are coming together. Where it looks like a loop, the pincers are actually closed, and where it looks open, that actually shows the two branches coming round to meet each other. And some of them are doing it again. So the ends of the little pincers are in fact pincering up.
And there's at least 30 kinds of this, and most of them you can't tell apart. Some you can with a microscope or a hand lens, but for the most part, you just stay at ceramium.
So ceramium spur. Oh, exciting stuff.
How does the Electra differ from the Canopium?
The Electra is very furry and spiky looking. Canopium is always very, very smooth. And Canopium is generally on the undersides of things like cobbles and boulders, whereas the Electra is generally out on the top, mostly on seaweeds and animals.
Okay, so
They look very similar, don't they? Yeah.
In that they're both bryozoan crusts, yeah.
Yeah, I think this is healthy Canopium.
No, this is Electropolosa.
Okay, I was just forcing you to say it. Okay, it's not very furry.
It's not very furry, but it is. A lot of this is dead. So you say healthy, it's not that healthy. A lot of this is dead, but where it's alive and healthy, you can see it's being furry around the edges.
Yeah, well, that's it. We're just trying to think it through. So I'd have said over here, you can see that these little circles are spiky.
Yes.
Or toothed. And so that's an indication of Electra. Down here, they're
Nicely toothed over there.
you know, you can see the teeth, although they're empty, they haven't got the fine hairs on except where they're living. We'll see if we can find a clearer example. So this is a good bryozoan crust, and if you can't be confident, that's what it is. It's a bryozoan crust.
Yes. I don't think we've got a very good canopium in this at all because I wasn't turning cobbles.
I think often it would be easier to distinguish between Electra and other stuff. You'd say, this is Electra, and something that's canopium, you'd need a better picture of because it could be
several things.
Dead Electra. Okay, a cheery thing. We've got some worm tubes, some Polydora worm tubes on this rock. Cherry crab. Cheery bits of seaweed. So we can scan around. Oh,
Dictyota dichotoma. So
yes.
the nice tidy brown seaweed with rounded ends.
Rounded branching ends. So that's the column of 3. Indeed, well done, well done. That's the column of 3 sprouts up in the middle. And we'll find you a nicer example, but there it is. I mean, dead clear, even on a wide angle view. You can see that, so almost the highlighted growing edge is a thing it has. And that's picked out of a scene where you can't see it. Oh, that looks like a cluster of sand masons to me.
Yes, I think that's why this one was included. Also, nice electropolosa there. That is very furry looking.
Oh.
See, when it's alive, it's very spiky and furry looking.
How's that for you, Inga?
It's good. That's good.
Yeah, so looking straight down on it, perhaps you're not, the hairs are very fine, so they're not obvious, but zoomed in, and let's see if we can just sort of get it to sit up a bit more. So zoomed in, the hairs are that bit.
Yeah, especially if you shoot it against a dark background, they'll usually stand out. They're on the edge of something. And if you stay zoomed in and go down a bit, you can see the individual tentacles on the sand masons.
Oh dear God.
They're actually coming out of their tubes.
Yeah, so this is a cluster of sand mason tubes. Often you just see the sand covered sort of wig, sort of a kind of a duster shape. But those are protective tubes for these clear feeding tentacles, which are having a whale of a time under here. I mean, not something you see every day. They really seem to be at it. I wonder if they're at it. We will never know.
Oh, and there's a slipper limpet on the left.
No, yeah, it's a bycatch. Sorry, when I zoom in, it gets a bit too big. But yes, so slipper limpet over here. Always worth noting, and see how insidious they are. It's just blended in there.
Just being a rock.
Just being a rock. Okay, more scenery on its side.
That's the Subarites scene.
Oh yes. So,
I think it's fine on its side.
it's nice enough on its side, but it can be the right way up. So we're saying here we've got some Subarites massa seaweed sponge.
There was also a grey top shell, which we haven't mentioned before.
A grey top shell.
In the middle now.
Yeah.
That's recently changed its name, annoyingly. That's now Steromphala cineraria, which is obviously very easy to remember.
But if you're familiar with a historic name, there's an audit trail of historic names. So if you're confident in the historic name, you can use that and move on gradually when you're coming.
It's Tricateur.
I didn't hear. Okay, so this sponge Subarites massa has been pretty common this year.
Yes.
And it has occurred on the snorkel trail at snorkeling depths, which has been a bit of a surprise. I've come back in from dives, having been sort of just exhausted by fighting around looking for damn sponges, and found rocks covered in this in about 1.5 meters of water.
And it is big, isn't it? And it's a big, spongy, squashy thing.
Yeah, it looks a bit like an orange brain
Mm.
that's had a bit of a kicking.
There was a close-up.
Yeah, quite a filthy one. So that's what it might look like from a distance. You can see it's covered a couple of cobbles there. But if you had a dawn, oops. Oh, I'll change this. So if you had a dawn with you, oh God, okay, get on with it. That's it. If you had a dawn with you, then once it's saved, you could take a close-up picture. And dare I say it, you wafted the crap off it, didn't you?
I may have done.
But I found this sponge seemed to collect crap, and it might just be because it was in relatively shallow conditions that sand landed on it. Some species gather sand, and some shed sand. And Subarites seemed to be one that was often dirty, but it's not stuck, and you can waft it away.
You can, but I'd say if you're going to do a wafted picture, always do a pre-picture and an after picture, because a lot of things will shrivel up and close if you waft at them because they don't like it.
Yeah, sorry about that jiggling around. I was trying to get an intermediate.
Oh, there's a nice ceramium.
Oh. Excellent. Yeah, so we're just zooming in a bit. I was going to say that we've got lots of this sausagey stuff. So we've got lots of gastroclonium reflexum. Oh, there's some better bits. And there you can see them curling over. And the reflexum part of the name is because it bends over. I wonder if the gastroclonium bit is because it's like a gastric banded tract.
I think it's like because it's intestinal. It's gas.
Yeah, it looks gastric.
Yeah.
It looks like a sausage. And so they're sausagey, but not individual sausages. Somebody's been, it looks like an incompetent sausage maker. Somebody's been sort of indecisive. Sort of each branch is pinched in, but then the sausage has been wrestled with and malformed.
Elastic bands around it.
Yeah. And then we've got some Cladophora. And here we've got some ceramium. Oops, let's zoom in. And that's quite nice. You can see a good selection of little pincers there. Hopefully everybody can see pincers.
Aren't they quiet?
They're very quiet. I reckon they've all gone to sleep.
No, they've all gone off to have their tea.
Yeah, good move.
Yeah, I can see the pincers.
Excellent, thanks.
Yes, I can see them.
Excellent. So it's a nice little seaweed, but it is a little seaweed. And really needs a sort of a close-up picture, but it's sort of harmless to shoot at small things that you can't see, because I mean, even a fairly modest camera will do you, it depends really, I suppose, on the size of your screen at home, will do you a good 10 to 50 times magnification. You can actually bring stuff up like we are here. So we've got this on a laptop and we've got the same kind of view you have. So it's about 8 inches diagonal across this picture. And so when I put this up, we're getting something that is maybe 5 millimeters high, is an easy 50, 60 millimeters high. That's about 12 times rule of thumb. So it's a decent bit of magnification that you can get. Onward, we'll never finish. God, what the hell's that? Okay, so what this is a core solaire. So we have, I guess, an outstanding discussion over whether we have horseman anemones or dahlia anemones.
Or both.
Or both. And we probably have both.
Yes, we do.
But I think, in all honesty, we have a massive predominance of dahlia anemones. So the story is that a horseman anemone doesn't have anything stuck to it, and a dahlia anemone has things stuck to it. They both have lumps.
They both have warts, but on a dahlia anemone they're adhesive, and on a horseman they're not. And a horseman always has a bit of a gloss on it as well.
Probably.
Because it looks like a horse's bumhole.
Yeah. So we would say this is a dahlia because it has some stuff stuck to it.
Yes.
But it's clearly not trying very hard because there's loads of stuff and it's hardly got anything stuck to it.
Well, they only ever pick up big bits, so it wouldn't pick up the dusty, rubbishy sediment. Oh, they do.
Yeah, it probably picks up what it needs to.
Mm.
And it probably gets stimulated to do that if it needs protection.
Mm.
And it may be that it's not protection from animals, but it's protection from abrasion, because
Yes.
these live low on the reef, stick to a rock in amongst the sand. Yeah.
Nice little velvet swimming crab hiding behind it.
Yeah, and so that's an easy ID of a velvet swimming crab. The bright red eyes are a giveaway.
Mhm.
There's a purplish tinge to the claws, but you can't really see the back legs. But by then, that's a dead cert velvet swimming crab. If anybody wants to dispute anything or say why, then please chime in. I desperately want us to get away from trying to do ID that anybody would ever say, well, just because it is. I think if you're going to do an ID, you want to have some features that you positively identify. So red eyes, purplish tinge on the claws is enough. We don't get any other red-eyed crabs.
And if you met it in person, it would be trying to kill you.
In a cowardly way.
Ineffectually.
Yeah. Excellent. Lots more nice seaweeds, but I think we've seen them all at the
Yes.
moment. Oh, what's this? So this is another way. I often do this with my wide angle pictures, is because in a wide angle picture, it's not always obvious what you're taking a picture of. I will reach in and point at the stuff and take a picture, because sometimes you're trying to note something, or you're saying, I don't have time to identify this now. Dawn clearly knew, and what Dawn's doing here is holding the placamium out of the way so she can see this thing, which I'll give you 10 seconds to shout.
Leucoselenia.
Excellent, well done, Hermione.
Yes.
Yeah, a Leucoselenia sponge. You can see this is a tubular little sponge, a cluster of little tubes. It's a nice little thing. Seemed to be lots more of it at the start of the year than later on.
Loads at the start of the year, wasn't there? It's almost none now.
Yeah.
And always up in the seaweed, so clinging on.
Yeah, I think by later in the year, there's quite a lot of hard to distinguish lumps in the seaweed. So maybe it got going and then took a bit of a battering and it's become less defined.
I think over to the left of it, there was something else.
Ooh.
So that's a colonial squirt, and it's not quite big enough to differentiate itself properly yet, but it's going to be Didemnum maculosum. You can see the little individual holes in it have got spiky outlines, and once it gets going properly, the whole thing will be spiky and lumpy.
Yeah. And we're talking about the oval caramel coloured thing here, cream coloured thing behind the seaweed. And the red seaweed that's in the front is placamium. Whoop, sorry, finger trouble.
It's raining.
And you can see the placamium there. You can see the teeth on it, and you can see how it looks like it's stamped out of thin red plastic. So it looks like it's laser cut out of thin red plastic, and it sort of the branches curve, sort of teeth, sort of first one way, then another way. So hopefully you're building up a picture of placamium. We really should have taken a nice picture. Okay. And onward. Oh, just scenery. Oh, it's a prawn.
Ah, yes.
And this is just a precursor, hoping you'll be able to cope with us for a while, because we'll have more prawns later on. Let's not waste time on this prawn.
Okay, you might say what it is for the people who aren't staying here. So this is Palaemon serratus, which is the common prawn. You can't quite tell here, but he's got a nice long pointy nose, and he's the one who'll come out and clean your fingers on a night dive.
Or during the Oh my god, call's off. Okay, Dahlia in its natural setting, out and about. And in this position, this is why I mentioned the horseman Dahlia conundrum. So supposedly, at this point, it would be impossible to tell what that was.
Because you can't see the...
You can't see whether its stalk is sticky or not. Supposedly, horsemen get bigger, but I think our experience is that you see a very small number of horsemen. So you would note it when you see an anemone that is positively a horseman, and the rest are almost certainly dahlias.
And either side of the dahlia, there are patches of brown encrusting algae, which is another free, easy species to record.
Look at it, brown encrusting algae. Oh, if only Mick was here, he'd be wetting himself. Oh,
There it is, showing its knickers.
I can see.
No, that's a stone.
It's a stone.
Oh.
Can't tell a thing. Now, the fact that it's full of gravel is not a determining factor. That just shows how tolerant they are of rough conditions.
Oh, that thing.
Okay, this is a good one, and soon we will speed up. We thought this was a little single sea squirt called Mulgula, and Dawn said, oh, it isn't, we can't tell what it is. And if you look closely, you can see extra holes in it. So this is a colonial sea squirt caught in amongst sort of sediment on seaweed. Sea squirts tend to regress, and when they're not in 100% identifiable form, you just have to give it up. You cannot tell what they are. And we will have more examples later on. We've done an hour already.
I know.
So what we're going to do is speed up a bit, but we would say in the background, there's some Gastroclonium reflexum.
Yep.
More scenery.
Yep.
A close-up, and this is a close-up. Is it a, oh, it's not a sea squirt.
Nope.
This is a little
Sponge.
lying on its
Ciliata.
Yes.
Yay,
Cyclone
well
ciliata,
done.
I think that was Inga.
Yay.
And you can see the little neck at the bottom of spiky cilia, little spiky things. This is a calcareous sponge, so it's not silica glass.
Oh, I thought it was.
No, apparently not. I thought that was a dead cert, that was silica glass, and this was a silicate sponge. This is apparently a calcareous sponge.
Oh, so it's transparent.
This is, yeah, it's transparent calcium. Clever old sponge.
How interesting.
A sun's, oh, starfish. So excited.
Mysterious rubens.
Oh, excellent, excellent background muttering of things. There's a Asterias rubens, very good. Worth noting as you go along. We want you to record everything you see, and so taking a picture of a starfish is a reasonable thing to do.
Nothing interesting, carry on.
Well, there we've got some more Electropolosa. You can see its fuzz. Onward. Oh. We've got a piddock shell.
Actinia.
And actinia, and somebody just shouted.
Yes.
Actinia equinus.
Yeah.
Paulina, a little beadlet anemone. You can't see its beadlets. That would be one for the snorkelers. You'll see a lot of these. Because the reef is so shallow, we see them quite a long way out. Anybody want to tell me what this obviously green seaweed is? Come, Inga.
Indus crispus.
It is. So Chondrus crispus is being rotten here. So Chondrus crispus, the red seaweed, you can see I've moved over onto the brown stuff. That's Chondrus crispus, the brown red seaweed. And over here, that's Chondrus crispus, the green red seaweed.
And you can see it's slightly iridescent as well, which
Yeah.
it often is.
Slightly, they're big and coarse, and down here, it's a bit finer
Because it feels like it.
because it wants to.
Does that iridescence mean anything?
I think it really just means that it's shiny, and so it catches the light nicely. I
Yeah.
don't think it's a particular chemical composition or anything.
Yeah, probably an optical property of the kind of mucousy growth on new stuff. The old stuff looks very leathery. Look, we'll skip on because we've bored you a bit. Oh, look at that! Finally, finally, Dawn gets her dream and gets to show you a Mulgula sea squirt.
Yeah, so this is Mulgula complanata. It's the only one you can tell apart from the other 3 or 4 species of Mulgula because it lives in seaweed. It always lives up off the ground, all by itself, stuck to a piece of seaweed. and it always has a complete covering of sand grains as well. And it's a nice little round squirt, 2 siphons very close together.
About the size of a pea.
Yeah, maybe a little bigger, maybe a broad bean for a big one.
Okay, so the things you can see are its siphons. So we're looking right down one of its siphons, and the other siphon is at the bottom. And a bag with 2 siphons on is the sign of an individual sea squirt. Where you see molgula forming a carpet, one of the other molgulas, they can be so dense that rocks are completely covered, and you'll go, this is odd, this rock appears to be slightly bumpy sand, and that is a carpet of molgula sea squirts. We'd use photography to make notes of things we encounter, like a rope. We've crossed a pot rope. That gives us an idea of how many lines they're in, or they have in that we're crossing, and that's a useful thing to record. Please note it if you can. What about this?
Okay, this is a sponge for which we have no name. It's often this colour, often a more bluey shade, and I have not got round to doing spicules on it yet. Maybe next year now, I think. So it's spongy, it is a sponge. It's not breadcrumb, which it looks a bit like. It's actually a lot more of a bluey colour than it looks here.
Yeah, and I've zoomed in just to show you can't see sort of the regular little holes that you'd find in a colonial sea squirt. You can see, I guess, a sieve structure. So we go fully in. You can see it's a mesh, and that's characteristic of a sponge, many sponges, because they sieve water into themselves through a fine sieve so they don't choke. More scenery, that's rather nice. You can see all the different seaweeds you are now completely familiar with. Ah! Some macro life.
Oh, another prawn.
Another prawn.
Same again.
Yeah, same again. Definitely the most common prawn.
More of that.
More Chondrus crispus with Electropalosa on it. Ooh. And what's that? It's Y-shaped. Any idea? Excellent.
Rhodymenia, hold my eye.
Well done, Hermione, too. Nobody stands a chance with those 2 here.
In amongst it, I've just noticed, which I hadn't noticed before, there's lots of little semi-colonial squirts. I believe, looking at these here, they're Archidostoma aggregatum, which we don't see in many places. If you go a long way off Overstrand, the whole world is carpeted with them. But in other places, you just find them in tiny overhangs.
Okay, for people who haven't seen it, it's these little holes that are grouped together. This is a cluster of sea squirts, and the reason this is a sea squirt is you can see the holes are kind of toothy, and that's the sea squirt mechanism for stopping it choking on stuff. These are guard hairs, and so they protect its inhalant siphons from, I guess, lumps going in and probably things going in as well. Although there's quite a few animals that live in sea squirts because they're good protection.
Oh, that's pretty.
Oh, well, it's just excellently photographed.
Nice red arm. Yes, carry on.
Yeah, so obviously a velvet swimming crab. Nice red eyes, nice purpley blue streaks down the arms. Oh, seaweed.
Yeah, so this is a close-up of that Cladostephus spongiosus we had earlier on, and you can see now it is just like Canadian pondweed, a central stem with lots of little hairy leaves curled up round it, and that snail that's on it is a species called Rissoa, and it's covered in other things, which I can't tell what they are, which are disguising its basic shape.
There's little white blobs on sticks.
Quite interesting.
Yeah. We'll have a look later on. We won't ruin your life with it, but hopefully you can see the Cladostephus looks from a distance sort of quite thick, but actually it's a fairly normal, branching seaweed, but has little dense branches off it, very regular dense branches, and that's giving it a kind of sort of teddy bear tentacles kind of look. Dahlia anemone, general scenery, and you can see we're progressing. Dawn could say where we are. Now we have a squat lobster, Galathea squamifera.
But he's got a bryozoan crust. Ah, that's Electropalosa again.
Yeah, we had a look at this earlier and argued about what it was and thought from its teeth it was Electropalosa, but lots of the stuff on it was long dead.
Yes.
So this animal hadn't shed for a while, and it had colonies of Electropalosa on it that were in varying condition.
Yes.
So this is a brown squat lobster, Galathea squamifera, and this is the one that occurs in 1 to 2 billion on the chalk reef. The other ones are either much rarer or much smaller. And in the prawn bonus, we might talk about those. Although it might be unfair to make you
I don't think we're going to get that far, are we?
Okay, so just a bit of scenery. Some worms.
Yeah.
So how can you identify these worms?
So these are keel worms, the ones people are forever scraping off the bottoms of boats. They've got a hard calcium tube with a sort of an edge along the top, which people call a keel. And it used to be said you could tell the species apart by counting the number of keels. And this isn't actually true. They can the number of keels running along the tube can come and go along its length. So it is not a good way to tell them apart. The only way to do it is the shape of the very end of the tube. I can't do that. So we just stick at Spirobranchus sp for these.
Okay, just in case it's not obvious to normal people, I mean, those white things are worm tubes the worms build to protect themselves. The worms live inside. They don't come out like an earthworm. They have little fan heads on them, but they tend to be quite nervous, and those retract before we get there. So in the middle of the screen now, the round thing you can see is a retracted fan. So that's a live worm at home. If you can catch them relaxed, they can actually be very pretty, often blue. If you can't catch them relaxed, then you are just looking at the tubes they live in, and you're missing out on the joy of the thing. The orangey coating is probably a bryozoan, which we hope to see later on. Excellent. An elegant anemone.
Yes, very clearly. It's a species of Sagatia. We get two kinds that we tend to see on the chalk. This is Sagatia elegans, and the other one is Sagatia troglodytes. This likes to live in clean conditions, is often on the verticals. Troglodytes likes to sit in a layer of fine sediment or mud, and is generally on horizontals where that kind of stuff collects.
And surrounded by Polydora worms.
Make it even cleaner.
Yeah, so I mean, these are a thing that not everybody sees, but they exist in vast quantities. They're the things that the crabs are often eating out of the rock. Otisina felina again, beelit anemone.
Actinia equina.
Oh, sorry.
I couldn't remember, sorry.
No, well done. And a nice picture of Inga, quickly, Inga.
Is that a red rhodamenia? Is it a red no, what's that?
That's Dictyota.
That's not Dictyota. Is that Dictyota? Is that Dictyota dichotoma?
Yes.
Yeah, so this is a brown seaweed that is brown, but with a green tinge. And so it's really not fair. It's probably clearer in person that this is a semi-transparent, translucent, quite a nice brown, and it's quite a distinctive brown. And the fact that it ends in these sort of bunny ears like lobes with the green highlighting is quite true to life. It's quite a smart looking little thing. Thank you, Inga. Oh, look at that exotic wildlife.
Oh, cutie.
So the reason divers are always peering at bryozoans and hydroids is in the hope of finding nudibranchs. We get quite a few nudibranchs, but I think they're easier to find on the wrecks.
Yes.
Because the wrecks tend to aggregate life, and they're easier to search. Whereas the reef is a huge, homogeneous stretch, and so they're quite difficult to spot. So these things aren't super numerous normally.
No.
Anybody want to hazard a guess about this one? Five, four, three, two, one. This is a Polycera feroensis.
Quadrilineata.
Oh, yeah, absolutely right. Quadrilineata. I was thinking, mustn't say feroensis.
I was thinking, mustn't say the other one.
Oh, how embarrassing. No, this is Polycera quadrilineata, and doesn't really have a common name. I think its common name is lined Polycera,
It is.
which is
Stupid.
completely feeble. So there's quite a lot of white sea slugs, and they need close attention. There's a lot of white slugs with yellow detail on, and this one is a Polycera because it has big distinct rhinophores. That's these antennae at the front, which have lamellate rhinophore. They're lamellate rhinophores, they're layered, and that gives it extra smelling surfaces. The frill around the mouth, they are oral processes, and they can vary in numbers. And then there's lines down the back and bits out the back. This is easily confused with feroensis, which has less lines and more bits around its face, and Ancula cibosa, which has little stubby tentacles out of the ends of its and out of the bases of its antennae. So it's really quite complicated to tell them apart.
And this has just been split into two as well, hasn't it?
Yeah.
This is definitely the right one.
Yeah, there's always science going on, and it's tiring. You can see how big this thing is. That's Dawn's hand, and Dawn has tiny little hands.
Like Donald Trump.
Like, not that small. They're not freakishly small. They're just appropriately small. And so this is less than 5 millimeters long.
Yes, because it's clearly about half of my thumbnail, isn't it?
Yep. Okay. Oh, that just looks like a shot of some seaweed.
Yeah, carry on. That's not interesting.
Okay. We'll try to pick up speed. Oh, this is a worthwhile seaweed. Let's throw it out there to one of two people who will butt in.
Osmundium.
Excellent. So Osmundia is a club-shaped red seaweed.
Yes, it is red. I've never seen it being red at all.
We have if you've got our seaweed book, there's a nice page of all the different colours of Osmundia, from green to brown, and I think some red examples. So it's a bit like Chondrus crispus. It's the shape that is characteristic. It's a bit like a club.
And also it gives off poison gas, so it's a fun one. Cladstephus again.
More Cladostephus spongiosus.
Now, this is not a very good, well, not a very clear picture, but the stuff in the middle is the seaweed Cryptopleura ramosa, which is one that you only tend to see when you get a bit deeper. It's quite a transparent red, and if you hold it up and look closely, it's got some very tiny veins at the base of the leaves. And that also tends to be a bit iridescent sometimes.
Yeah, so you can see that, broadly speaking, it's a bit Y-shaped, a bit like Rhodamenia, but it's more transparent, it's less well-defined, and although it's not sharp, I do apologise, you can see it's wavy, it's not crisp and straight, it's almost ruffled.
Very delicate little thing.
Yeah. Okay. Nice rock, and a bit of shredded carrot sponge. Anybody want to do a sciencey name? I can tell Inga's itching too.
Amplica something begins with a. I can't remember.
Oh, don't worry. So it's Amphilectus fucorum. But
Amphilectus, that's it.
Yeah, it's shredded carrot sponge, and it takes its name from the fact that it is distinctly orange. We do see other colour forms of it, but the orange stuff is an easy positive ID. It can occur in this form, sort of splodges, or a crust, or quite tassely. but the colour is the thing. It is carrot orange. More Cladophora.
Yes.
Ooh.
Now this is an orange sponge that isn't shredded carrot. It looks quite like it, but it's actually Haliclona cineraria. And if you saw it in real life, you'd see it's more of a peachy colour than orange. And it's smoother than the shredded carrot as well.
Yeah. Hopefully you can see that it's not the same. It's not kind of children's storybook orange. It's a bit subtle, isn't it? But it's dull.
Yeah, it's dull. You hardly ever see it. So if you see an orange sponge, it's almost certainly Amphilectus.
Okay.
I'd say it's Rhodomenia. I'm not sure why we've got this one in.
That's Dick, isn't it? But there you are. See how confusing it is? Too brown. It's brown beside that gastroclonium. Yeah, here's the bickering. This is what Chris and Mark were here for. They were here for bickering.
Definitely.
So we'd have a look. I think if we look.
You're right. Yeah, stick Toyota.
Well, of course I'm right.
Fuck off.
Steady on. There could be children watching. Some of these people are very
Come
delicate.
on, no self-respecting child's going to be watching this.
Minecraft, isn't it? Anyway, you can
Beyond the 9 o'clock watershed, it's okay.
God, it is.
Yeah. You can see the greenish edge.
Yes.
So Dick Toyota. Nice bit of Cladophora. Excellent.
Crab.
Edible crab. Not a good picture, but we're just trundling along, snapping as we go along. Representative scenery, but all that whitish seaweed actually has bryozoan on, so it's all got Electropolosa growing on it. So you might think, oh, Electropolosa, frosty sea mat, it's just a little thing, but it's there in quantity, so you're seeing it frequently. Here, I think this was because there's some sponge in there.
Yes, so that's a sponge called Halisarca dujardinii. It looks at first sight a bit like breadcrumb. If you waft your hand over it, it'll wobble around. It's a very, very soft sponge. It's got no spicules in it.
Yeah, a wobbly sponge. I mean, really floppy, isn't it? It's like, people have been suggesting it's like sort of saggy skin, like a rock covered in wrinkly bath skin.
Also above it, a seaweed we haven't had so far. This is Tetrasiphonia plumosa. It's not the best picture, but you can see it's like big fluffy feathers in red.
Yeah, we've got a better picture of this later on, and if you'll stay with us, we'll find that. Oh my God! Quick, which is this? Okay, so this is a quick crab picture, and it would be easy to go, oh look, that crab has a flattened back leg. It's a swimming crab. But hopefully you can see behind that flattened section, there's another section. If I move that more into the middle. And, I can't see what the final section of that leg is like. And although you might suspect it was a swimming crab, on this side, you can see that's actually a pointed final section. So this is a shore crab, Carcinus manus, and that's your usual stock crab. They can swim. They swim a lot more than the other crabs we see. They'll swim after you and hang on to things, but a pointed final section of its legs makes it a shore crab. More scenery. You can see the scenery is increasing in size. So if we're doing a diagram, we would reflect this by saying the scenery is probably 1/2 meter high, maybe a bit more.
Getting on for a meter, I'd say.
Yeah.
It's starting to undulate and think about forming gullies.
Yeah.
Bit of that.
Chondra dasyphila.
Yep.
Nice bit of rocky upgrowth, probably 1/2 to 3/4 meter high.
Several painted top shells on that.
Several painted top shells.
Lots of vase sponges.
Little vase sponges, Cycon ciliata. So right beside it, there's a pair. Painted top shell again.
Flob.
And flob. The stuff on top is probably amphipod tubes. And that adds a beige flob layer to lots of stuff, if not almost everything during the summer. we've probably got some closer up pictures of that. It's not particularly attractive, probably a bit nauseating when I move around like that, and it can disguise things. And sometimes you'll have to say, okay, I maybe would be able to tell what that is, but it is covered in flob, and so I can't. And so you must sadly move on to the next picture, which is of Jassa falcata. These are small amphipods living in tubes, argumentatively and in vast quantities. Are you still covered in Jassa falcata, Penny?
I've had to have several baths since then.
When I often dived with a club on wrecks, people would return with a covering of these over their knees, where they had been crawling over the wrecks, and these would be displaced from their tubes, and they'd take up residence on dry suits, because the textured outer surface of a dry suit is enough for them to hold on to. Earlier this year, Penny, Cat and I recovered a large quantity of rope and odd fishing bits and pieces from the Vera, and when we came back, we were covered in thousands of these, tens of thousands of these, because the rope that looked muddy was these tubes collected. And poor Penny, who had been doing personful work, had a thick covering of these. I think Cat and I, because we were much lazier and weren't nearly as filthy. Okay. Oh, a nice habitat shot covered in flob. So lots of this stuff is disguised by Jassa tubes.
Oh, that is nicer. So there's the Heterosiphonia plumosa seaweed again, and there you can see much better. It is fluffy red feathers, and it's another one that likes depth. So the further you go, the more that takes over.
And it may or may not be depth as much as distance from the shore. I think some of these things cope with better with lower light levels, and some of them don't like the friction of sort of sediment abrasion. Saucy crabs. Oh, light bulb sea squirts.
Clavelina.
Yes.
Which one?
Lepidiosis or something. Lepid something.
Lepadiformis.
There we go.
Excellent work.
These were relatively common in June, but by this end of the year, there's almost none left. And apparently that's the same everywhere this year, so we're not sure what it is about the conditions that's really upset them, but they're not doing well.
Yeah, I mean, some years we have huge bunches of them. Some years we have less than these, and other years we have this kind of middling amount. So again, you can see each of these individuals has 2 circles on, and those are its siphon tubes. They stand up as individuals in, I haven't really got the right kind of angle, stand up as individuals all connected together by stolons across the surface. So they can occur on their own or in huge numbers or anywhere in between. Lovely things, and you can have them in a lemon colour, white, bluish, orangish, pinkish. We think it depends what they're based on and what they've been eating. More scenery, you can see the bottom is kind of raised. There's some undercuts here.
A couple of fish hanging around in the middle.
Wrasse.
There's 2 kinds of wrasse.
Now I think a corkwing on the right, the little barred one, and I think probably a ballon on the left, although not rich in ID features.
No.
I think that's really circumstantial. Yeah, it's so much bigger than the other one, and a bigger one of the corkwings would probably be more dramatically marked. That looks like a small female ballon wrasse.
I'd go with that.
Sorry not to be more positive for you. This is a close-up again, more Polydora worms. And then, look at those worms. Look at their little feeding tentacles.
And that's another elegant anemone, just a different colourway.
Yeah, so elegant anemones come, I think, in 6, 7 different colours.
Loads.
We tend to get the more muted ones. Okay, there's a piece of chalk damage, and as you say, so a bright area. This must have been, say, months or weeks ago, because it's starting to colour up.
I'd say it was something like a pot or heavy wreckage, because it's a flat, scraped area, isn't it?
Yeah, looks like a machined path with a flat surface with a straight side. So pot damage.
Just red and pink encrusting algae.
Look at those crusts and a barnacle, a bonus species.
And an end on worm tube.
Oh, end on worm tubes. Yeah, we're doing well for worm tubes here. Yeah, so you can almost always find some more species if you look around. So there will have been thousands of barnacles so far, and that's the first one we've had a proper look at.
Oh,
And a fish at last. A fish. So this is a rare fish for us. What do you reckon, Inga?
oh, cruel.
She's so good. She's good value.
Some sort of goby, I would have said.
Good start.
Excellent. So goby is something we could probably be reasonably confident about. In this instance, you can see the scales on its head. And the scales on its head are characteristic of a rock goby. And they're not something we see very often, although this year we've probably seen them, well, a few times. I mean, half a dozen to a dozen times.
If you were there, you wouldn't mistake it for one of the little sand or painted gobies, because you'd see it's quite a bit bigger, even though it's the same shape.
Yeah. Over on this rock, you can see there's a nice fringe of bryozoan, but you can only really see the edges of it. You can't really tell what it is. And some more sand mason worm tentacles.
Going mad.
Going mad. Excellent. Nice fish. Good picture. Well done.
Thank you, my man.
Okay. And this is an ordinary picture,
It's a rubbish picture.
but we can tell what it is.
Is it a butterfish?
Yes.
It is. So it's an odd shape. It's not an obvious goby because it's got a long wormy body. You'd have a tail by now, or it would be narrowing. So this is an eel-shaped small fish. Got those saddle marks on the back and the dopey expression, I think. That's a butterfish. Got little bits of electra there on some placamium. That's a bit of a find.
Now that is a
Textura.
what? Sorry.
Textura.
Yeah, it's a white tortoiseshell limpet,
Ooh.
which is Tectura virginia. It's completely covered in pink encrusting algae, so all you can see is the banded very bottom edge of it as you're going round, which is sort of red and pink stripes.
Yeah, look at that. You can just see the sort of the stripes extended by what must be the growing edge of the shell extending out from the algae. So the shell has to grow faster than the algae, and so it's leaving a bit of its natural colour. They have an offset peak.
Which would be over to the right in this picture.
Yeah, so it looks a bit like one of those pixie caps. So there you are. Tectura virginia. How big's that?
Oh, bloody hell. Maybe a centimetre across?
Maybe I think this is smaller. I think that's 5 millimeters, but maybe a centimetre. Depends on the size. And we've got some gastroclonium reflexum here.
Reflecting.
Look at that, curving down again. Oh, and there
That's poo!
is that gastroclonium. Sorry, that's Tectura poo.
It is, and the poo is diagnostic because the much rarer other Tectura, whose name escapes me, does different poo. It's
Excellent.
yellow.
I'm glad we've given people the poo they want.
Starfish.
Starfish. Never forget to take a picture of a starfish.
Mysterious Rubens, yeah.
Well,
Excellent.
Barnacles.
Yeah.
Barnacles.
Yeah, barnacles. So in a crappy picture, but you can tell
Montague.
barnacles,
Ravenous.
earworms. Excellent.
Ah,
Lobster again. Homerus gammarus. Dogwell, probably.
almost certainly. So with this one, because there's not much to go on. If you turned it upside down and had a look at the foot, you'd see it's a yellowy colour. If it was a proper whelk, it would be black and white spotted, a bit like a cow.
Yeah, I think if it was proper whelk, it would be more ribbed. You'd see
It
those
would
structure.
be, but it's completely covered in crap.
Yeah, so they are. So things are often complicated by the stuff that's growing on them. More gastroclonium reflexum. No, this isn't the best picture in the world, but here we've got some snowflake sea squirt.
Diplosoma.
No, that's
that
Didemna maculosum.
Yeah.
No.
First time you shout diplosoma, you're wrong.
Okay. None of the useful stuff in this picture is in focus.
No.
But we can tell that the holes in this colonial sea squirt have 6 spikes. And the Didemnum maculosum is sometimes called the snowflake sea squirt, actually because it grows in little white patches. But like a snowflake, its holes have 6 points. So, well, snowflakes all have 6 points.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, all snowflakes have 6-point symmetry.
Okay.
But none are the same, unlike the Didemnum, which is a bit uniform, really.
And also the pink blur is another colonial squirt called Morchellium argus. And we'll see a slightly...
Morchellium.
Yeah. Would you say that was enough to say Morchellium if you didn't know what it was? Because you can't see how many spots it's got on.
You can't, but if you knew it was from Norfolk, you probably could, because we don't get a Plidium.
Okay. So there's a number of these club sea squirts. You can't even see it's a club sea squirt.
Yeah.
So it's a number of individuals, and the different types have different numbers of spots on. Moving on, this is a piece of purple sponge. So Norfolk has a unique sponge. It doesn't have a scientific name yet, so calling it purple sponge or Hymodesmia spur purple, or purple Hymodesmia spur, is valid. And depending on the lighting, it can be more or less purple. So this isn't particularly sharp, but it is purple.
Very.
We do have a number of purple sponges now, but none of them are like that. This is a piece of chalk damage, but this is probably crab damage.
The chalk was already weak.
This is granulated chalk and breaks like this because it was permafrosted, I've been told by geologists. And so this allows crabs to break it up more easily into small gravel. So it breaks a bit like a toughened windscreen glass. We are speeding up slightly now. So 2 different types of crabs, maybe having a fight, maybe agreeing to disagree. Another well-populated rock. We've got a little Inachus spider crab. So,
Oh, yes.
yep. So sponge decorated. On top of which is this sponge?
That one is Amphilectus fucorum, I think.
Yeah, so brightly orange along the top where it's properly lit. So always bear in mind you might not have nice lighting. And as we move up onto the top, it gets more adventurous and you can see it starting to tassel, which is why it's called shredded carrot sponge. And there's lots of other things. There's some rather rank looking Cladophora, some Rhodymenia holmesii, the Y-weed, pink encrusting algae. Again, you could spend months and probably feel like you have. Encrusting worms, a painted top shell. How much of its diet does the painted top shell get from cleaning its shell?
40%.
40%, that's interesting. It looks as though at some point painted top shells just give up because they don't all stay clean.
No.
But lots of them do, and that's why, because they lick themselves clean and that counts as collecting food. Okay, what's this one? This is Hypoglossum.
I think this is Cryptopleura ramosa. I think it's probably the next one or two.
Okay, so Cryptopleura ramosa, not a great picture. Enough to remind you if you knew what you were looking for.
Yes. And this is the only photo on this dive we have of vertebrata Bisoides. Sorry, it's a new name. I can't get it. Later on in the year, this pretty much took over. Oh, that's pretty, isn't it? Took over absolutely everywhere and was one of our most common seaweeds for the year.
Okay, that looks like a siphonia.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's a siphonous seaweed, I
Yeah.
think.
So what you can see there, and that sort of candy striping on the main stem of the seaweed, is that the stem's made up of multiple tubes, capillaries, and they are twisted like a rope. So that's fun. And again, that's the kind of thing it would be hard to see without a hand lens yourself, but a camera picture can pick that out.
And it was full of Rissoa snails, which I don't think we've mentioned so far.
Okay, we haven't mentioned Rissoa.
None of them are very sharp.
Yeah, just trying to find that. So you can see those little blobs are snails. You can see the whirl of a snail there. Snails there. There's a snail. Sometimes the year there are billions of those, and they're another free species because there seems to be a shortage of species of small snails.
Luckily.
So
this is that Haliclona viscosa again, the peachy coloured sponge. It's under a boulder rather than on top where you'd expect to see breadcrumb sponge and the like. And also over towards the left of it, there's another little colonial squirt. This is one of my favourites. This is Distaplia rosea.
a little pink job. You can see the individuals there, and they group round a communal outlet. Why, you might say, isn't that Halisarca? Well, this is firm. This isn't wobbly.
This is very spongy sponge.
Yeah.
It's
Why,
one of the firmest. Sorry.
why might you say, isn't this breadcrumb? And say it's underneath and it's a more peachy colour. And we'll show you a picture of breadcrumb, which tends on the whole to be more vigorous. So really an enthusiastic thing.
I realise we've been going for about 2 hours now. So if you want to quietly slip away, just do it and don't tell us and we'll just keep talking.
Oh, that's unfair. We could be going for ages. So more shredded carrots.
Yes.
Here we've got
Big squat
a
lobster.
filthy squat lobster. You can say so the big ones have obviously been around a while. They've had a chance to sort of cake up with growth. That's Galathea squamifera, brown squat lobster. Now we're on to a selection of
Mysids.
yes, mysid shrimps, opossum shrimps, and we will do very quickly the prawns at the end so you can see some better pictures of these. These dart around like little fish, often around openings where other animals live, typically crabs. They're just feeding on crabs' waste because crabs are really messy eaters. But they're tiny, half a centimetre or so, buzz around in clouds of sort of 10 to 20.
Never keep still.
This is close-ups of Clytia hemisphaerica,
And over on the right, there's a very nice Rissoa.
which is that little hydroid we saw earlier on, so sticks with little polyps on the end. And as Dawn butted in while I was saying another thing,
You drew breath.
there's a Rissoa. I didn't, it was just a space between words. There's a Rissoa, a little snail, and all on Cladostephus spongiosus, that sort of dense looking seaweed. All fun stuff. Rocks with shredded carrot sponge. Rocks with shredded carrot and purple sponge.
More shredded carrot.
Shredded carrot. So we're out fairly deep at the minute, but I think we'll be turning back soon. Red encrusting algae, pink encrusting algae. Nice painted top shell, shredded carrot. And this is fairly typical scenery for just beyond the gullies or towards their ends.
Yeah, so we're around the end, aren't we?
Yeah, not a particularly big gully. Maybe sort of half a metre high to that bit Dawn's going beside. But that probably is the end of a wall that will mount up.
Thus.
Yeah, big pieces of chunky seaweed. Is that Halichondria baobanchii?
It probably is. I wouldn't like to say one way or the other. It is partially transparent, so it probably is. That's not a very clear
Yeah.
picture.
It's another yellow sponge, but we're picking it out of this wide angle picture, which isn't giving us great lighting or many clues. It's a yellow sponge, which is kind of transparent on its peaks. So that's the thing to look out for.
That's that is Rhodymenia holmesii on the right, but
Hypoglossum.
Hypoglossum hypoglossoides on the left. It's got a little bit of a midrib, and Rob will find a leaf in a little while where it's got these long dark marks either side of the midrib.
Okay, I'm doing the midrib at the moment, so you can see a faint line up the leaves, stipes. And I think over here we have dark marks. I can't get them quite into the middle because we've scanned up to the top, but you can see the kind of speckly patterns either side of the midrib up at the top. Looks like it's had a rash.
Yes.
But almost like it's had a rash, been folded in half, and it's got a sort of blood pattern on both sides.
This one's quite common with us down in the gullies, but it never grows to full size, so it only ever gets to a few centimetres long at most. So if you look at the example in the book, you'll find quite a big, sort of long tapering seaweed. We never get that. For some reason, it just never fills its potential.
Okay, I notice we've got little sort of feathery hydroids here. We haven't talked much about those. Do you think that's a stretch to identify it?
Yes, I do.
Okay, maybe we'll do another dive and we'll see more of those. So a feathery hydroid at the moment, and we'd stick at that.
This is that Didemnum maculosum again, so it's a bit clearer, and you can see it's starting to spike up a bit.
Yeah, so you see 6 pointed holes. So little 6 dots around its holes. That's a clue here that that's a colonial sea squirt. But there's so much other stuff growing through it. It's a bit of a mess.
Purple sponge.
Purple sponge. Why do you say it's a purple sponge?
Because it's purple and a sponge.
We've got a nice old lady wanting to do a competition for schools to give the purple sponge a name. I think the purple sponge is probably going to be a winner.
That's breadcrumb. Sorry.
Okay, why is that?
Because it's a sort of beigey colour, it's on top of the boulder, and it's really solid looking, opaque.
Yeah, it's starting to bulk up into kind of crumbs. Allegedly, it smells and behaves like breadcrumbs, but
I'm not sniffing it.
no. Okay, so here we have a bryozoan we haven't mentioned so far.
Yeah, so this is a crusting bryozoan. It's Schizomavella linearis. It's always this peachy pink colour, and you can see at its leading edge where it's growing, the cells sort of stretch out into long rectangles rather than the little individual roundy ones.
Yeah, it seems in almost launching channels for the zooids to complete in as it expands out. This is definitely alive. You can see it's sort of got bulging little zooids in it. But that's it. So you look for a peachy crust with these sort of, I guess, almost looks like a fin around the edge.
Yeah, it's generally in patches, maybe 5 centimetres across, and often on the undersides of boulders, as well as the sides.
Yep.
This is a trick one.
Okay, Inga, what's this?
Is that the canopium?
No!
That's Electra.
Christ's sake.
It's the other one.
Electra pilosa.
Let's get a. So if we zoom in, you can see how. So there are teeth around each of these little individuals, and it's a situational thing, isn't it? Sort of this grows all over seaweeds, and it's doing really well. The amazing thing about this is it's not just growing along it, it's completely encapsulating it. So some bryozoans do grow in this form. So like twigs, like a tree structure, but this is a flat bryozoan just completely coating a seaweed and taking on a branched shape. An impressive piece of growth. That's really, really healthy. This is 2 sea slugs having at it. I've got better pictures from whales. You can actually see their stuff and all their junk.
I don't wish to know.
Anyway, Okay, we'll do a Welsh talk. Okay, onwards.
This is the goosebump sponge, Diacidia fragilis, and for some reason this is the only bit we saw on this whole dive. Normally, once you get reasonably deep onto the chalk, it's everywhere on the verticals and overhangs, but here there's just this one small section.
Yeah, I think we might just have not got quite deep enough for it to really take off, because we're heading back. And that's the story we'll use for this. Might not be true. Who will know? Over here, we wondered what this thing was, and we think this is slightly regressed Diplosoma spongiform. But we don't know.
No, can't tell. There's not enough detail to tell anything about it.
Yeah, just a bit of a pattern. So that remains a mystery, one of those mystery crusts. Oh, some more light bulbs.
Tubularia.
Yeah, so not the bestest picture, but this is Tubularia in division.
What was behind the light bulbs?
Are you saying on the last one what was behind the light bulb?
Yeah,
Okay.
the white.
Okay, you've got a mix there of Didemnum maculosum and I think some Trididendum cerium, which is very, very similar, just looks a bit less attractive. Tends to go a bit beige.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Oh, excellent question. You can see you can spend any amount of time looking through pictures like these.
I do.
So this is Tubularia indivisa. You can see it's a stalked hydroid, has fairly decent stalks. It's got crud growing on it. We'd stop at crud there. Has a single head on top, a single polyp head. Classic territory for nudibranchs, not rich in them this year. More worms.
Yeah.
Here we got some cute little sea squirts underneath some fun algae. So all these little cream translucent bags are sea squirts.
Yes, these are Porphyra japonica. We have two kinds of Porphyra. We have Porphyra listeri, which is the native, and Porphyra japonica, which is the evil invasive. If you see it growing along things and branching out, this is growing along some tubularia stems, it's japonica. If it's hiding in a single skin, in an overhang or under a boulder, then it's the native one. And the evil vicious japonica like this will eventually make bright yellow sort of ninja throwing stars that it spits out, and they land somewhere else and start a new colony.
Okay, if you're mystified by what the hell we're looking at, join the club. As you can see, these are nearly transparent. They are less than 5 millimeters across, and they grow in a carpet that's quite dense. So they're often bycatch in pictures. And so if we go back in again, you can see these are growing on tubularia stems, and you can probably just about see in sort of the ones in the center, the siphons sticking out. So these are little round individuals all clustered together as sea squirts. And there are some more Rissoa snails. Excellent, you're doing well. We're getting through these. So
More chalk damage.
chalk damage.
Another thing we didn't know what it was.
Yes. Oh, so we'll mention this as we go past. This is a recessed squirt. This is Morchelium argus,
Yes.
a club squirt, and you can see that the zooids within it have 4 spots on, little 4 spots, but could have been eaten, could be regressing. We think probably maybe a bit of both, because some of the individuals are just sinking away. And this is what can lead to things like sea squirts being almost immortal. They can fade back almost to a sort of embryonic state and then regrow. So they effectively have only biological individuality. They don't have continuation of that, I guess, instance. They die back and then restart completely.
And this one's full of amphipods as well.
Yeah, you can see there are little white things with antennae sticking out. They're amphipods which seem to be growing within the mantle or the tunic of this tunicate. Grand stuff. Another Leucocelina sponge. More Polydora. This is grandstanding. We should marvel at. Oh, look at all that. Oh, but we haven't got time to spend long there.
No, feathery hydroids, not a good picture. It's probably Halopterus catarrhina, just because it's very tiny and very delicate, but it's not a good picture, so you wouldn't use it for proper ID.
That's heartbreaking. Okay, more
Nice tall chalk.
More good seeing. So tall chalk. Maybe we doubled round and we found a better gully to go back on. So this looks like it's probably getting on for 1.5 meters plus high. Look how lumpy the chalk is there. So steps up the side of a chalky gully. Oh, nice gathering sponge. Under attack from. I thought Inga would be there.
Serious Rubens.
Yay!
Excellent. Ooh, that's a good bit of Leucocelina. Look at that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's good. I mean, if it's come out in a wide-angle picture, that's a monster.
Huge piece.
Yeah, so maybe an inch or two high. Lobster mooching.
More tall wall.
Bits of tall wall. Oh, a shark. Oh, what's that? Yeah, so it's cute little lesser spotted shark, knee dogfish, canicula.
Skylarinus canicula.
Skylarinus canicula. Yeah, a bit of a treat to see them. We really don't see very many. Probably seen as many this year as I have any other year. I think Chris has seen about 1,000.
Yeah.
So he's been a lucky sausage. And we're definitely heading back now past boulders. And here, what's this, Dawn?
This is breadcrumb sponge. This is
Breadcrumbs.
breadcrumbs.
Helicondria, panacea.
Yeah. So you couldn't really mistake that for anything else.
Yeah, you can see it throws up these ridges with big oscules on. When it gets going.
It really gets going.
Yeah. And that's the problem. A lot of these things get abraded and don't get to fully form. And anything that's been abraded or knocked down is going to be harder to recognize than something that's sort of fully demonstrating itself. And like when I go out clubbing,
yeah.
that's when I'm at my best.
Like you do all the time.
Yeah, our village is really rife. Chalk damage. But what's that in amongst the chalk damage? Ooh. Oh.
It's a fish with a hat on.
It's a fish with a hat on. Oh, what a rotten time to be diving with a wide-angle lens. I'll try and take another picture. Oh, that's not quite so bad.
There's seaweed going past.
Oh, the seaweed across his face. I was going to be famous, and now it's ruined.
So Tom Pop Lenny.
It is.
Yes.
It is. And there he is getting away. Oh, if only there was somebody here with a more appropriate.
Oh. Oh, that's a good one.
My crappy pictures would have been good enough to tell what it was, but Dawn was there with the right camera at the right time. So Tom Pop Lenny, easy to ID because it's got antlers. There are other blennies with antlers, but we haven't seen any of them around here.
No, we're very low on antlered fish.
Yeah, so look out for them. Some years they've been quite common, and this is certainly within snorkeling depth, and we have seen them very shallow, but they're not common. So hopefully the snorkelers will see some more if they gain a bit of a foothold.
So we've turned and started back now.
Yeah, this is kind of aggregated flinty lumps, lots of that stuff, almost locked together by the pink encrusting algae and the starfish.
Big tubularia.
Filthy tubularia on top of a rock. Look at the crap that's collected on them. They must have been there for ages. They're a pioneer species. They seem to be very tough. They will grow in extremely sort of hostile places under great abrasion. And that means that they're the first thing there for other things to stick on. And so these are probably a fair age. Once the nudibranchs come in, they'd be wiped out. So we've had none of those through.
Yeah. So now we have definitely turned back and the current's getting up, and so we're starting to hurtle back as fast as we can.
We're hurtling, and honestly, it won't take very long. The seaweeds we saw on the way out, and worthwhile sort of snapping. Here's a gravel interlude.
And most of that gravel will actually be keel worms, where the boulders smack into each other during the winter.
Yeah. So if you zoom into the gravel, you can see actually it's not stone gravel. You can see all the tubes in it.
And what isn't tubes is bits of shell.
Yeah. I mean, it took us years to notice this. That look, it's worm tubes. Because what we've got is chalk and flint. But as far as sort of calcareous input goes, we've got worms, and the worms turn over faster than other stuff. There's a quick sort of festival of stuff on this rock.
On the right, we've got what used to be Bugula plumosa, a bryozoan. Nowadays, it's Chrysularia plumosa for no reason at all.
That's in the centre now. You can see the light bulbs, the Clavellina lepadiformis.
I would have called you.
Got lots of mostly Placamium seaweeds. Oh, what's that one? Is that just Rhodymenia?
Yes, it is.
And I think there's some Distaplia rosea in the middle, that
There's
pink squirt.
Quite a bit of it over here, I think.
Oh yeah, a bit more of over there, and some Trinodemnum cerium.
Yes, and more feathery hydroids that we still can't tell.
Okay.
Far out.
Yeah, we can't ID those too far away.
So that one boulder's pretty much got a form on it.
Yeah, so there you are. If you didn't fancy going anyway, you can just go and look for a good rock and sit with it.
Purple sponge.
Purple sponge. Starfish!
I think this is just general.
Mysterious reading.
Excellent. Worms. We've got worms.
Matosaurus tricator.
Note Spirobranchus spur.
So we record pots, we record pot damage, sort of clean white chalk with evidence of breakage. Generally snapping habitat. I take a lot of pictures on the way back, just because you're generally in a hurry.
That's Cladostepus again.
So I think this was a feeble attempt by me to make sure I'd seen this seaweed, which had turned up several thousand times before. And we've got confusion here, where we've got Dictyota and new Cladostepus, which is the stuff with the brown ends. Okay, we're nearly done. We're nearly there.
Slip Olympic, carry on.
Slip Olympic in the middle. Just a rock. That's some seaweed. Oh, beetlet. Ah, and we're home.
Hey. Run!
Okay. Let's quickly stop sharing this and see who's still. We're still nearly everybody here. We're still Chris here.
We've got Chris's iPad.
I feel privileged that Chris is still here. Excellent. You are great people. Thank you very much. Hopefully that was fun.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
this.
Could you just repeat the name of that peachy bryozoan?
Oh, Schizomavella linearis.
Yeah, thank you.
It's a Marbella.
Yes, it sounds a bit like Tom Marvolo riddle. Okay, so that gave rise to this surveyor form, and so you can. I hope you can all read that. Well, Lucy's laughed out loud. So the back of a surveyor form has about 90 slots, I think. So that forms, I think, probably amounted to the high 70s of species. Oh, Inga is demonstrating her thingamajig.
That's the one you were helping me with. The one where we went out to the petrified forest and then came back via the Vera. So lots and lots and lots of things there.
Excellent. Show us again. Show us again.
Woo!
Excellent. So I think you could probably branch out into a form, into a surveyor form for giving you more space. Excellent work.
Right.
Oh, looks like we've got two chatty things.
Oh, what were the chatty things? Oh, Jens had to pop to the shops. Uh-huh. And Kat needed to go as well. Oh, well, now we can joke about them. Okay. How does everybody feel? I feel guilty that we've kept you here for ages, but you seem in good spirits. Would you like to have a look at our prawns?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, let's have a quick look at prawns. So I thought that was kind of a fun thing. Okay, so whoops.
That's not.
Okay, this was as much as anything for Kat, so it's a shame she went. Last year we were on a night dive. I saw a tiny red prawnish thing and had trouble taking pictures of it. And when we got it back, we realized it was interesting because prawns and quite a few things change color at night. And the consensus from the online experts is this is a processor prawn. Not a processor, but the Latin name is processor. Excellent. And we have tried to identify it, and you'd think this should be a good enough picture, but the exercise here was to show that it is very hard to identify some things, even with what look like excellent pictures. And before we go on, I'd say, look, over there is another prawn in the background. This is a hippolyte prawn, and I'll show you some better pictures of those. So this processor prawn showed up.
Where is that?
Almost, I think this one was from Weybourne, and the next one is from East Runton. I think this one was bigger, maybe 2 to 3 centimeters long. Not a big prawn, but looks very much shaped like a common prawn. And it was only really later on, when we got home, that I realized that it wasn't just a common prawn gone a nice color. It was different. And that's despite being able to look at it sort of this closely and see, it hasn't got a long nose. Similar kind of tail, but red and with a non-long nose. And when I say long nose, that's sort of the rostrum, a spike between its eyes that comes out. So this is probably a processor prawn, but in going through the key for these, none of them mention it being red. What color do they say it is? It's
Green.
green. So it seems to agree in all respects other than typical color.
What's the little spongy thing on the side? Oh,
That was
the squirt thing.
Polysyncreton bilobatum. It is a squirt.
So yeah, that's Polysyncreton bilobatum. There we've got some Porophora, and there we've got a Morchellia margus. 4 dots. Looking at your prawn, is it actually one of the things you need to see are these sort of front face feet that come down. They're maxillipeds. So feet it uses for eating. And until you know that, you can't say, now I need this prawn to roll over upside down and demonstrate these. So that's one of the best pictures. I took more pictures of it, and this terrible picture has better views of its front maxillipeds. So this builds into nearly enough information to perhaps identify it. And there it is again, not being easy to spot. There you can see those front legs slightly blurred and start to become suspicious about some of its antennae. All this builds up into a picture. Oh, are you seeing this? You're not, are you? No. Okay, so I've got to stop sharing that. And I've got to share another thing. Let me share that thing. So we did a search online and found that there are some interesting resources available, although these happen to be in French. So these are a key for various families of prawns in French. We tried our English key and it wasn't really a whole lot of help. So the thing about identifying prawns is every single type of leg is a bit of jargon. Prawns often look very similar, and you can see these ones kind of have different spiky noses. You see the almost unicorn horn coming out the front. And it turns out that as you go through, that eventually the processors have a small rostrum. And that drags you through to the sort of processor group. And this seemed the most likely one, processor caniculata. But if you wanted to, there were a whole lot of other processors. And the thing you were looking for, so here's caniculata, whoops, up one, is this dirty great long antennae thing, which didn't appear in any of the pictures.
No.
So I don't know whether it uses it to pick its nose or to impress its friends. And this version they've got looks as though it's probably about 6 centimeters long. So ours may well have been a baby. So in the end, it was I guess, a best evidence guess. But this was a fantastic piece of work. And this is at FAO.org. And here's the index of it. And you can see that there's sponges, cnidarians, barnacles. What are stomatopoids?
Mouthfoot.
Don't know.
Well, there you are. That's the problem. Crevettes, lobsters, or prawns,
It
shrimps.
might be goose barnacles.
So a complete marine ID key online, albeit in French, which we're not allowed to understand now since we've given up being civilized, which consists of many tens of different PDFs. So worth investigating if you're keen, but not a casual read at all. So I thought that was fun. And so if we go back to looking at our prawns, where are prawns? Oh, where's my prawn? There's my prawns. So, okay, so that was a complicated one, but we have some other fun prawns here. So this is a hippolyte prawn. These can be transparent, utterly glass transparent.
That's the most visible hippolyte I've ever seen.
Yeah, and this is from Scotland, where it's too cold to change colour. So they're characteristically sort of hinge-backed. So there's another one.
Fat bum.
Got a big old bottom on that one. This is maybe another one, but we think this is a Eulalis prawn. Again, similar characteristic, but a sort of a messier nose. Oops, that's a brown shrimp. I thought I'd put these in a better order. Here's a brown shrimp, which we would see. Crangon, crangon. It can stand because its legs come out the side. Here we've got a hooded shrimp. It's a more dramatic. Really nice stripe down the back of that, and dead straight. The back is totally straight.
And it's like a tiny lobster.
Tiny lobster. You can see these front pincers. I think Dawn found these by looking under rocks. Here we've got a selection of common prawns.
Yeah.
So you can see its rostrum there, quite a big spike. And you can see how colourful this is. And that's atypical, but that's the way they change. This is a nighttime prawn. A daytime prawn, nice looking. The competition with these always is to try to get the lines in the eyes to show up. And you can see why it's called serratus there. And this is the long nose of the common prawn. So that's the rostrum sticking up. And again, and again, and again. And again, finally, this is a little related palemon prawn from brackish water on Orford Ness. I don't know why we picked them out. I think they were in a net, weren't
Yeah,
they?
so we're trying to put them back in.
And the water was completely opaque. We pulled them out and then we couldn't see them properly because the water tension is holding its features down. Bit annoying, that. This is a northern prawn. You can tell by the accent. This one, you can say, oh, well, how do I tell that? Normally, they've got a pinkier inside. So they're about the same size as a common prawn. Quite a good nose on them and quite a good pink core.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, that's probably the most typical and archetypal northern prawn. And that's a difficult one to tell. And again, super orange. But you can't just say, my prawn is orange in size, because these are eulalis prawns. And they've got short, quite insecty faces. You can see that the face parts are sort of bent back and up. They're articulated differently, which doesn't help, because you can't see that without a picture. So lots of mysterious little prawns. This is another eulalis. And again, I mean, complicated, almost moth-like face parts, but a short face that's articulated. Unfortunately, this pattern, I suppose, is sort of characteristic, but the colour isn't. So
No.
mottled.
They seem to change colour at will, those ones.
Yeah. Underwater, red doesn't transmit well, so it reads as brown mottling. These are some mysid shrimps for Inga, and so we've got a choice of those. Often called, or sometimes called, opossum shrimps, because they carry their brood in that bulge underneath. So they often look pregnant, and that's because they are. They're pretty small. Catching them in water is a decent challenge. And those are just mysid spur, because we haven't identified them to species. This
Fillets.
yes, caprellid skeleton shrimps. As you get in a bit, you can see these are very praying mantis-like. They have elongated bodies, hold on with the back legs, and they can reach around with their bodies and snap at prey that goes past. The one in the background is pregnant. You can see that sort of transparent shell has a pocket for presumably live young.
Yeah, I think they start out as eggs and they hatch inside and then get spat out.
Yeah, and they're on the end of a piece of mermaid's glove sponge. And there's one in amongst loads of Jassa falcata, so you can see those sort of front legs are like sort of praying mantis limbs. Big stupid face. In amongst tubularia heads, can't really see its back end, and a world of Jassa, little wriggling things. Sorry, Penny. This is Anidotia. These look like centipedes, often travel on passing seaweed. I know that I think Kat and Inga have both had close encounters with those. We can usually tell these apart if you can look at the tail, because the tail, if it's sort of forked with a kind of a round fork, that means it's Idotia linearis. And so no matter how nice the picture of the face is, you need a picture of the tail so you can tell what it is. Because there's quite a lot of them. This one on a piece of line is identifiable because we can see the tail, even though it's tucked all its little arms and things in. They're quite nasty pieces of work. They occur in many thousands when they're small. They then eat each other until some of them are big, and then they go off and eat other things. This isn't a prawn. This is a little lobster.
Oh.
They're very cute. There's big inset eyes, quite decent claws if you catch sight of them.
How big would you say those were?
I'd say that's probably 2 centimeters long. It's a very small lobster, maybe 3 if it reached its arms out. Don't see them that size, very small. These are in fact taken from a lobster release. We've seen maybe 2 inch, 5 centimeter lobsters out on the reef. We see lots of squat lobsters. This is just a little common brown squat lobster.
I think it just molted.
Yeah, I think it probably just popped its arms out and it's waiting for them to harden up. I think that was in a rock pool, wasn't it? Just waiting underneath to harden up.
So that's canopium.
Oh, they are in canopium.
It looks very flat and it always looks dead because the holes look empty, that it's got very big front holes on its skeleton.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so that was that. Yeah, still there. Looks like it's trying to get on. Its legs are probably a bit floppy. That's why it's not running away. But not every small squat lobster is just a common squat lobster. This is Galathea intermedia. And so how big is one of these? How big do they get? 15 millimeters?
I was going to say 1.5 centimeters for a big one.
Yeah, so this is a big one. You need a picture of the underside of it to see these 5 characteristic blue spots. And that confirms it's Galathea intermedia and not just a little squat lobster.
They also often have a white stripe down the back, but not always.
Yeah. So that's a prize photo. Well done, Dawn. And I think that brings us to a close.
Woo!
So I hope you're still alive. Well done if you are. You've lasted the course.
Thank you very much.
Well, it's been a pleasure having you all.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Oh,
Thank you.
Bye, folks. Thank you very much.
excellent. I think we won't stand on ceremony. We'll say thank you very much for sitting this out. Hopefully it was fun and you can see how much you can extract from the background of a picture, and you can get an idea of where the limit is, how much you needed to see before you give up and you move on. And sometimes it's more productive to go, these are my easy wins from a picture, and pick them out, and so not to labor over stuff, because in some of those pictures we could have gone away and tried to ID and used all our evening up, and it's better to move on and say, well, how am I doing? I've got tens of species here, I'm doing well, rather than push for the one impossible one at the cost of the easy wins, like eventually seeing a starfish, for example, which you might have missed if you'd been really laboring over that background flood. Excellent. Thank you ever so much for coming along. We'll see you all around.